Everybody, welcome to Full Spectrum Survival and another Full Spectrum Survival live show. We have two great guests today. We have Jason from Big Bear Homestead and Patrick from BreakAway Homesteader. You guys might have followed us. We've kind of made the rounds on each other's channels, talked a lot of great topics. One of the highlights, especially for me, was when Patrick did a live sealing of rice in the show. Or was it beans, Patrick?
It was rice and beans.
Rice and beans in the show, and so that was a highlight for me because that's not something that you see very often. Today, we're going to be talking about returning to normal, or at least finding your new normal in the event of a disaster. Before we get right into that, I want to talk a little bit about current events and some things that are going on around the world. Our algorithm got triggered to die-offs, and so we always have that in the lexicon, in the dictionary of things that the algorithm is looking for in news organizations and social media around the world. And so we had a spike today in die-offs, and I went and dived a little bit deeper into that and saw that we are experiencing another marine life die-off, dead fish washing ashore, turtles dying, porpoises dying, similar to what we experienced before the Fukushima earthquake. And I had kind of put that together as a correlation that was unknown at the time, and so I'm trying to keep an eye on it. So you guys keep an eye on it too. If you see a lot of die-offs, just beware, know what's going on. Saudi Arabia is taking flack right now for acting in overt unison with the United States and with Israel. We're just seeing an explosion of potential military activity happening between these three major players. You've got Saudi Arabia bringing that war to Yemen. Huge war. I mean, so many innocent people are being affected by this because the rest of the world just kind of took their gloves off and said, okay, you guys handle it. But the US and Israel is playing a major part in this. And this is what we in our community need to be prepared for, that we one day might be those peons that the rest of the world or another country doesn't care about. And even though we might not be directly involved in an event, that trickle-down effect is still going to affect us and our family, and we might still find ourselves having a hard time getting clean water, just like the people in Yemen that had nothing to do with the war and don't want anything to do with it. We might find ourselves having a very hard time getting medicine, just like in the people in Venezuela. We might find ourselves being forced to choose sides just to get medical care, just like the people in Syria. So it's those things that I think are the most alarming and what we have to be ready for, because the rest of the world, literally, besides America's closest allies, the rest of the world is turning against America, is turning against Israel. There's a lot of prophetic information here. There's a lot of international recognition through different religions that have seen a shift. And when this shift, and it's been called a lot of different things over time, but when a shift in the current global empire changes, we'll go to world war. So just keep it on your trigger list. Keep watching it. Saudi Arabia is backing U.S. and Israeli efforts to undermine efforts by the Palestinian people to achieve an independent nation. We know that has been a drama going on for a long time. What has happened with the United States and North Korea, the details of which we will never know, and how that might upset China and the other players in the realm, is something that we need to keep an eye on. We see the economic war. It went from a threat to overt in literally 2 weeks. This will affect us. This will affect your and my ability to get goods, to purchase goods, to make that money that we earn turn into valuables that we can hold on to. Is going to get worse. We might not be Venezuela next week, but it's coming. The Iraqi voluntary and pro-government popular mobilization units have pledged to get revenge for a deadly raid on fellow fighters in the Syrian eastern province. More of the same. A military expert at a diplomatic school run by the Russian Foreign Ministry says that the Pentagon is training dozens of Takfiri terrorists. Now, please, guys, in the comments, let me know what you think about this. Being that Syria right now is a proxy war and you have these major military nations taking sides, the United States is openly supporting what in other times, Western media would consider terrorist organizations. So basically what happens here is you've got a terrorist organization, and then a major government will reach out to them through various means and say, we can't support you, but we want you to do these things. And so that organization will break apart, and you'll have an independent organization that was new, wasn't formed a year ago, doesn't have the bad rap of what they've done, and now that government can independently support them, give them arms, give them money, give them anything that they need to further that proxy war. That's another thing. In the event of social collapse in the Western world, the UK, United States, Australia, anywhere like that, that's what we'll see happen. You probably won't ever see Chinese troops on American soil. You won't ever see Russian troops on Australian soil. Not for a very long time. But what you will see is the independent backing of terrorist organizations in those countries to act as their foot soldiers. Last on the list, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said on Thursday that the United States needs to make it harder for all of its trading partners to have high trade barriers in order to achieve the current U.S. president's ultimate goal of lower barriers and a level playing field. What we have to do, he says, is create an environment where it's more painful for other parties to have huge trade barriers. What that means is it's going to, we all shop at Walmart. We hate it. It's junk. You get a lot of, stuff that has no credibility to the metalwork, has no strength to the craftsmanship. But we all buy it because it's cheaper. It's about to get a lot less cheaper. And that's going to affect everybody in here's personal economy, our ability to prep, and all of those things. So that was kind of my hot topics today. Did you hear anything there, Jason or Patrick, that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I hate Walmart.
I hear you. Yeah, we all shop there.
We all hate
Yes,
Walmart.
we do. Yes, we do.
Hey, I got an alert. It was last night. Yeah, I think it was last night. My wife's in the chat. She can correct me on what day it was. But I got an alert to keep an eye on the fact that the planets are coming into some alignment that they only come into like once every 100 and some odd years. But this alignment does something where it activates a lot of the volcanic activity on this planet, and that's the reason why we're starting to see a lot of volcanic activity everywhere. I mean, we just had another one go off the other day, didn't we? We didn't have another.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. I mean, extraplanetary poles definitely have an effect on tectonic movement, for earthquakes here in our world, and for volcanic activity. And those two are they don't exactly go hand in hand, but they're very closely related. So yeah, you're right, and we are seeing a huge increase there. I mean, just look over the last 24-month period, we saw a huge shoot up of volcanic activity to the point where we still have it going on, and the mainstream of the world has kind of said, okay, that's just a new normal.
Yeah.
You got Guatemala, you got Japan, you got Hawaii, of course, it's ongoing, and there are three different types of volcanoes, and yeah, they're all going off. Activity in Alaska, coming from Bali, Central Java, Indonesia, and again in Hawaii.
Yes, that's right. So definitely we need to keep a look on it. Volcanic, if a big one goes off, the whole world's in trouble. When little ones go off, and I say little, but they can still affect an entire region, can still, with the tectonic activity that goes along with it, upset nuclear power plants, still have huge problems. But when the little ones go off, we need to be prepared more on a personal level. If we experience a global change due to volcanic activity, we need to be prepared to grow inside greenhouses and do some of those things that we talked about on our last show over at your channel, Patrick.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely need to prepare for that. But globally, it'll be horrible, and it's still up in the air. And one of the big ones was, hey, a volcano went off and blocked our atmospheres. Radiant, our beams, the ultraviolet light coming down onto the earth. Laugh at me, Jason. And killing off all the plants, which killed off a lot of
big yellow thing in the sky.
Yeah. What is that yellow thing?
That
The
heat
star.
lamp. Somebody turned off the heat lamp. Well, isn't it Yellowstone? Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it, if Yellowstone goes full, it would almost be like a nuclear winter?
It'll be a nuclear winter.
Yeah. And now we could have decades of quieter eruptions. We could have decades of other shoots going off. But that's definitely one of the ones where
Yellowstone's a caldera, and I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie 2012. They tend to they kind of underplayed it on that. You see Woody Allen on there going crazy, going, "Oh, it's so beautiful." And you see the whole caldera bulge up and then bulge down. Well, that was just a tiny perspective. This caldera is literally thousands of acres wide, and if that ever went, it'd be crazy. There's one called Sulfur Volturno in Italy that is substantially smaller, but it is still a caldera that's ready to collapse as well. That can cause issues over in Europe.
Now, as we look at all of the events going on in the world, and as we do our best as families or as groups or even as individuals to prepare for those events, I think what we each have a fear of as humans, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, what we each have a fear of is the unknown and the change that will take place during a crisis. And no matter what crisis that is, that could be social disorder, could be a personal crisis, like your family loses their job or the economy just gets too bad, could be a larger event. No matter what happens, we have that unknown that's on the other side of that event. And so we each strive to prepare for that. We each strive to have enough food because that's a normal for us. A way to purify water because we have never been with a time, many of us, that you didn't have some form of access to water. We prepare to get medical care if you don't have access to it on a regional or a local level. And so we each, whether we know it or not, are looking to make things as normal as possible in the event of a disaster. And I think we can kind of cover the before an event, that's sort of the preparatory stage, the during an event, and then the after an event, and sort of returning to whatever form of normal that you can. So first, let's talk about before an event. What are your go-tos? Maybe let me talk to you on a personal level, Jason and Patrick. And anyone in the chat room too. What are your go-tos to make things normal, whether it's a toy for the kids or an entire pattern of things?
Go ahead, Jason.
No, you go ahead, because I got to think about that.
All right. Well, you know how they say it. Store what you eat and eat what you store. That's the first step. That's the first thing anybody hears when we're talking about putting up food. And it's just that food brings you comfort in any case that you know it's going to be there. Your kid's going to eat SpaghettiOs, and he's going to continue to eat SpaghettiOs because he likes SpaghettiOs, and he's going to have that as long as you prepare for that storage. But everyday things, I mean, totally different to each individual person. Somebody that's rich sitting on the Jersey Shore right now is not thinking that normalcy is storing up those SpaghettiOs. And so it really all depends. Like normalcy for us is we've got a well and we've got a spare well pump in case something goes wrong, and it all runs off electricity. We have a hand pump that does not. And so normalcy is having running water. Normalcy is having a flushing toilet. Normalcy is everything that we're looking for in our everyday lives, but it's also everything that's going to be there when something happens.
Now, speaking of the flushing toilet, that's such an overlooked prep. That's something that is ingrained in us as humans. And many of the people in the chat room or many of the people watching this later might say, hey, I could go to the bathroom anywhere. But a lot of people, and I've experienced this with people I've went on primitive camping trips with, they have a problem adjusting to that very small new normal. And So have you worked with the kids especially, or are you the type of person who has a very structured routine for your constitution? And if you do, have you thought about planning for how you will adjust? Because I'll tell you what, if you start having a problem with going to the bathroom in the event of a disaster, you might think that that's the least of your worries, but how quickly the brain changes that normal mode of operation into a big problem is very surprising. So, Patrick, how about you? Or Jason, how about you? Do you guys have any family members or know of anybody that will be an issue for them? Or are they, is everybody good?
I would say what would be an issue with my wife is, of course, feminine hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
And, that will go away, but she's willing to accept that and willing to try alternatives in the meantime to know that she can continue that normalcy when that time comes.
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you what.
Robin, she's at least willing to try. See, that would be our biggest thing in our house too, I think. And I've got 3 girls, and when that thing, their cycle comes around, because that's why I let you go first, because when we were talking about what would we grab or what would we do to try to keep a sense of normalcy, well, one of the things that we've done here with our family was, with us being on a homestead, we raise a lot of our own food. So it's normal for everyday life to be working in the garden, checking on the animals, putting, canning the beans or dehydrating this or doing that. The only thing that would probably change would be the tools that we would use. If we don't have any electricity or any natural gas, then we're canning over a fire. But it still could be done. But the normalcy, in my house, not a lot of TV gets watched compared to an average American home. So I don't think that would miss that. With my children's mindset, it would be easier. Like, I could probably walk in that house right now, take that TV, put it in a box, throw it up in the attic, and we would switch into doing different board games and stuff like that. And I think it would probably have more of an effect on my wife and myself more than it would the kids. But I think our biggest hurdle would be the feminine hygiene when that time comes around, because we institute things here. Like, we're getting ready to institute and build a composting toilet outside. Nice. Because one of the things that it's very hard to do as a homesteader is make enough compost, because when you have pigs or cows and chickens and stuff like that, and you're trying to supplement their feed so you don't have to be dependent upon Joe Schmuckatelli's feed store down the way, a lot of your scraps that would normally go on a compost pile are now going to the pigs or going to the chickens. Right. Or if you think your cow is a little wormy, you're hooking them up with the pumpkin seeds, the squash seeds, or if you're lucky like I am, my wife is into essential oils, you're hitting them with the oregano on a lettuce leaf, so they'll eat it real quick, But
go ahead, keep going.
Making compost is a struggle for us, because we cut what grass we do cut here, we're drying it out, turning it into hay. We started doing that this year. And so we're instituting a composting toilet here soon. So that would, every time that, as my wife and I, we sit down and we say, we love to play the what if game, even with the kids in the car. What if this happened? What if that happened? Okay, what are we lacking? And that composting toilet's come up more than once. So that's one of those things, when something comes up more than once, you really got to start looking at it. And if you start putting some of these things into play now, then it becomes part of your normal. So then when it does happen and you have to rely upon it, it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah, right.
Rockefeller 7 in the comments there, he says compost toilets are very easy to find, cost a bit, but well worth it. Yeah, it's and Jason can account for this. It's kind of like getting a beehive for the first time. You're going to be spending quite a penny on there, but it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah. Well, look, we invested in the compost tumbler, which the commercial is a lie. It won't make compost in 14 days. It makes it in about 21.
I was going to say 3 weeks.
Yeah, to a month. We built compost bins from pallets, and we also use tires to put stuff in for compost. It's just when you start having a large garden and a lot of raised beds and stuff, like we practice hugelkultur. We just did a video for that for beginners. It just came out the other day. That helps out tremendously with the raised beds, and we may even institute some hugelkultur into our row garden just to help with the lack of compost, that we have. But instituting a lot of these practices now, when you still have the safety net to fall back on Satan's child, Walmart, you can,
Yeah, I had 2 people. Susan Smith said period cups. Another person mentioned Native Americans using using hair for a feminine pad. Now, Kelly has a lot of experience here. My wife, she has used reusable feminine pads, the charcoal infused ones, for
washable, dry,
machine washable, machine dryable for years and years. And her switch over, I don't want to say like she looked forward to it, but she looked forward to finding an option. And let me tell you, the not very expensive ones, if you're not into just getting on the sewing machine and making one today, they sell not very expensive ones on Amazon. And I think you can get 4 pads for around $20, worth literally their weight in gold. Susan Smith mentioned period cups, which period cups are a catcher instead of like a pad. Might be harder for some women to get used to because it's so radically different. But I would definitely suggest anybody with girls in the family, if your wife's still of menstrual cycle age, definitely try it. Even if it's just, hey, the grid's still on, lights are still on, we can still go to the store. You've got 4 packs of whatever in the washroom. Just try these this month and let's see how it goes. And so her operating procedure there was she would use them, and she would have a bucket filled with with water and bleach that was only enough to disinfect. And so she would use them. She would put them in the bucket filled with water and bleach to disinfect with a sort of a pre-wash. And then after that, she'll wash them just like she washes everything else. And so just try it. If you haven't already, as men, we don't really have to even think about that. So yeah, and I can see that's a huge apprehension for a lot of people. So please think about trying it before the grid goes down, because you don't want to have to be relying on cut up t-shirts and then not really having a plan of action after that in order to keep that a part of your monthly life. Daniel, God is my judge, says female cycle can attract predators. Absolutely. So if you are on the move, especially, and not just predators, but also tracking creatures, definitely keep that in mind and consider.
That can also turn out to your benefit too. Now, sure. I've heard, I've never tried it because that's just with me. Yeah. But I've heard some hardcore deer hunters take their wife's stuff and hang it in a tree, and during the rut, it just brings in the big bucks. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I can see it happening.
That could attract, if you're in bear country, that could attract some bears. That could attract pig. It could attract really any carnivore that's out there. And but that could also, it's a double-edged sword, because you can eat all of those guys too. You know, I mean, I've heard that fox and coyote and stuff taste okay, but I personally haven't eaten it yet. Now I'll eat the bottom out of a bear, you know, and of course we eat deer,
Right.
you know. But that, I mean, that could be a 2-syllable thing, you know.
Yeah, I would definitely keep it in mind. You know, that's another thing is we have to be prepared to go beyond our normal, our usual comfort level. And I think that goes for everything. You know, men too. You're going to have to get involved in that. If it's your time to do the laundry, you're going to have to, you know, grab the stuff that you're not used to grabbing. Yeah, exactly.
That's why they have
You know, you gotta do it.
And even if you need to get those, you know, chemical biohazard up to the elbow, rubber band around gloves,
just go to the Army Navy store and just get a full set of mop gear, and you'll be good. We can do the laundry then. During that time, we got the gloves, the boots, charcoal pants.
Yep, you'll be good.
So, question for you guys: how about? I mean, you guys homeschool. I don't. I got a 3-year-old. He's in public school right now, but he's just in preschool. So for entertainment, what do you guys do for entertainment? What would be your normalcy for your entertainment? Because what you're doing now is probably what you're going to be later down the road.
We do, and at least in my house, we have a lot of. I'm gifted with children with strong imaginations, and so there's a lot of gameplay. Now you have just one child, right, Patrick?
Yep. Oh, actually, I have 2.
But just one of childhood age, right? One of very young, yeah, that 3-year-old age. We were lucky that me or my wife was able to engage in that imagination with our oldest while he was in that period. And then as our youngest is now coming up, they still have a very good imagination. And we make sure that anytime we see shifts in that, because we all know as adults, our imagination starts to kind of go away because you got too much responsibility, and that kind of drowns imagination to a varying degree. Right. So we try to keep that engaged in as many ways as possible. We play pen and paper games. If you and your youngest is a little bit too young, but you're getting there soon. There's this game called Munchkin that literally my 5-year-old at 4 years old learned how to do math on and helped him learn how to read. And it wasn't meant to in any ways. It was just a fun tabletop game with cards and stuff. But it's kind of neat. It's kind of like a play on Lord of the Rings. $20 on Amazon is going to get it for you. Just look into it. It might be something fun for you to do.
Yeah, I would say you invest in board games, card games, stuff like that, but also invest in the what is this? 19. This was the 7th print or the 9th edition. The 9th edition of the Boy Scouts of America Handbook. This has a lot of different things that you can do with your kids, boys and girls. Me and my daughters are doing it right now. They got like tracking, knot tying, and stuff like that. But there's also 2 books out there. It's called The Dangerous Book for Boys, and it basically the flip of it is the one for the girls. The Dangerous Book for Girls, or I don't know what the girls one is called. Yes, that Dangerous Book for Boys book is a gold mine. Blaze and I mean, we went through like 2 of them because we were using them all the time. And we'd leave it outside, and stupid thing would get rained on because we'd get tied up doing stuff like that. Invest in rubber bands because you're going to be learning American history. There's nothing like going out and reenacting a war with rubber bands. The nice thing about a rubber band, you get popped with a rubber band. You can't say you didn't get hit. You missed me. No, I didn't. You got a big red welt.
No, that comes into what I was going to say for really anybody. I think if you look back 50 years, 80 years, when there was so much less to engage you, I mean, we're inundated with things to engage us visually. You know, we're just way overwhelmed. Yeah. If you look back to early 1900s and pre-1900s, little girls generally, and this isn't across the board, little girls played to be mommy. and little boys played to be daddy or the other guys in the group. And so I think yeah, exactly. I mean, I played, cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers, all that deal. And I think that if you prepare for that and make sure that part of your SOP, part of your plan for your family and for your children is that they can have tasks that both engage that play, but also gets a job done. I think you're gold there. And I was just talking with Kelly yesterday. She got a new cast iron tortilla press.
Nice.
And she used it, made some great soft tacos last night. But I said, next time, make sure that we set the time to have the kids be involved so that they're taking every step. One of them's rolling the dough, the other one's pressing it down and giving it to mom to fry on the heater, and then take turns, with the oldest on the fryer. And if you get them involved, but it's also play, I think that that's a great way to keep them engaged during a disaster.
So my wife thinks I'm a little crazy, but I'm going to show you guys a little something. I've always had the closet behind me closed up. And so every time I go to a thrift store or something like that, if I find a board game and it's complete, I'll get it. So I'll give you a little sneak peek of what's there. So if you see here, is loaded
nice
to the brim with board games. And I found some cool stuff. I found a original Milton Bradley Game of Life set.
Oh, that's nice.
Which, was complete from 1957. And stuff like that. But the games have evolved. The games have changed. You really see what's available there. But there's so much. Like, when my kid gets old enough to the point to where he can play games, we're going to be playing games all the time because I want that connection. And there's a big connection when you're actually physically doing something with your kid instead of, letting them do their own thing.
And, if you look at the jail setting, prison right now, I think those men and women that go to prison, they have to. Are you getting feedback, Patrick?
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
I am.
Oh, you are? What are you getting?
Just a reverb of my voice.
My headphones on.
Okay. If you look at the prison setting, those men and women have to re-engage their imagination if they're going to remain, if they want to get out, they have to kind of fall in upon themselves and say, what can I do with what I have? And one thing that really started to take a rise in the prison setting was tabletop games. So, like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. And there's one for everything. There's a tabletop for Star Wars, if you and your family are into Star Wars. There's one for, cyber future, if you're into technology. There's medieval, like Lord of the Rings. There's one's focused just on Lord of the Rings. And that has always been something that, I guess, at least for the last 15 years, my wife and I have done because they're a lot of fun. It's, it's like
Harry
playing
Potter.
a video. Yeah, Harry Potter, all that. It's like playing a video game. Like we'll do the Star Wars role-playing game. And it's like you're either writing a script for a movie or playing a video game. And it's all done with your imagination and on paper and with a preset rule set that kind of keeps things in order. So storytelling, I think, will be a huge part. I mean, imagine we go camping and everybody likes to get around and hear a story. And it's just something that engages us as humans, I think, to want to be taken to a fantastical place or, think about something that we're not currently dwelling on. So maybe think about that. Maybe think about getting, some pen and paper games in there.
Well, one of the things that we like to do when we sit around our fire during the spring and fall is we will play a game where I'll start it off like Once Upon a Time, and then it would go to my wife, and she'd be like, there was a big fat ogre, and then like my kids would be like, and his name was Jason, and it goes around, and the way that the story goes, if you're not in tears by the end, I can't, I got nothing for you. But
right.
And it's same way with like the what if game, or we do 1800 weekends here. We haven't done one in a while, but that's where I just go and I flip off the power.
Right.
We like to go do all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things that you can do to entertain when you're, because let's face it, in the very beginning of any type of scenario, before really anybody really ever figures anything out, you're going to have 72 hours to maybe a week before people start running out of stuff at their house, you know, and
Mhm.
so you got to find something to do, because a lot of us are not used to being at our house
Full time.
full time.
That's
And
true.
a lot of folks are used to the kids being off to school for 8 to 10 hours and then them going off to their job for 8 to 10 hours. You're going to have to get reused to your spouse. You know, a lot of folks are not,
You know,
They need
we
that time away sometimes.
yeah.
and
They're
that's
not used
true.
to. Yeah.
You know, we live in a different, a changing age, I think, and it's an age where marriage and relationships aren't what they once were, where parenting isn't what it once was. And not to say that anyone makes purposeful bad decisions or anything, it's just different. And I think Jason's absolutely right, because I'll have a lot of people talk to me and they're like, wow, you and Kelly work together, both from home on the same things with your kids all day. I couldn't do that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's just not for you. But the shift will come when they're forced to, like you said, Jason. And so I think that that's something that maybe we should each take into consideration. Like, since that's my normal, I always try to think, what if I didn't have that as my normal? Because that would certainly affect me on a personal level. So, I don't want to say I need to prepare for that, but I make sure that as I go out and do my own thing, go out for 3 days in the woods, it's not any big deal, and everyone still has, their peace of mind with it. So if you're on the opposite side of that, definitely think about, that re-engagement and what you can do. I mean, that could be huge.
Yeah.
That's
Did you think about it? If you're not used to spending 24 hours a day with your spouse,
Yeah.
You're two grown people that are they've got their own habits about how they do things, because you spend 8 to 10 hours separated at your job every day. Now you've got to come, work ethics are gonna smash, different roles, who does what. That's something that you and your spouse have to have that conversation now.
Right.
Okay, if we are trapped here at the house, nothing against you, I'm not trying to beat on my chest and go Captain Caveman, but I'm going to kind of need, it's going to have to go back to it was back at Little House. Clothes are still going to have to be washed. If we ain't got no power, you out there doing this, honey.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go to Walmart to pick up the hamburger. I got to be in the woods with my bow. And unless you're a better shot than me, then I got to do that. Now, if she's a better shot, by all means, I'd be over there in the corner going, but there are going to be times that you're going to have to work together. Like when you make that big kill out there and you bring it back, you're going to have to work together to process it.
Right.
And spending that time, so much time on top of them, no matter how much you love your spouse, you're going to have conflict, and you're going to have to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, you're going to have to learn how to work together, but you're going to want to learn together as well. I think one thing about normalcy that's not talked about a whole lot is the fact that, hey, I'll give you an example. Okay, I don't know if you guys watch Doug or Stacy or not. Doug just put out a video a couple days ago, and he was talking about how he's preparing his homestead in case he can't be there for his wife.
Right.
And so part of that normalcy is the fact that, there is a possibility, and you're aware of that possibility, that your spouse, your child, something like that, can catch some disease that could come up in the future, and they may die. You got to work together and learn together so you can pick up each other's slack when something like that happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. Old ways, you said we invested in a ringer. I don't mind washing, but not wringing clothes. I hear you there. Wringing is no fun. Now, we had I'm about to do a video on another don't buy this. We bought this same ringer, had it last. And so here's our normal procedure. Wash the clothes, wring them through, and we have two buckets, like tubs. I would put the ringer, take it off the bracket, put it inside the tub, close the lid, so it wasn't getting UV radiation. It snapped. The actual ringer, the rubber that goes on it, it fell apart, almost like it expanded and busted. Sent it back, got another one. Same thing happened again. And these aren't cheap. You're talking $150. That's an investment for something, especially if someone's not going to use it on a daily basis now. So I think I'm going to do one of those. So if you have a name of one you like, Old Ways, New Times, please put it in the chat room.
I would like to find one of them old 1950s washer machines with the ringer on it, because those, with just a couple of different pulleys, you can connect a bike to.
Yep.
And put a kid on a bike, let them pedal, and you can do stuff in the washing machine, and then as they're pedaling, you can also run it through the ringer and then throw it out on the dryer.
It's funny, the most of those washing machines you're talking about that are from the 50s and 60s, they're all still working.
Yeah, amazing how that happens, isn't it? But if you don't have power, because if I'm not mistaken, the pulley for the agitator is on the bottom, so you really wouldn't even have to do a lot of fabricating.
Yeah. Or you can just create a generator to run that.
And then becoming the wash becomes a two-man team. You got an adult washing and a kid on the bike.
Yeah, right.
Man.
Okay, so we kind of talked leading up to preparing for normal. And so that has to do a lot with getting your normal preps in order. Patrick, you talked about normal food, store what you eat and eat what you store. Huge thing that people overlook because they say, look, I got this on sale. Well, if your family doesn't like that 25-cent cream of chowder, no one's going to be happy. And so, but if you love it, please buy a whole bunch of it so that I don't see it anymore.
Got a picture of Ron the Cable Guy on there. You know what I mean? That crappy box.
Exactly. So definitely prepare to eat. Prepare for your constitution, for people to be able to go to the bathroom. Jason pointed out feminine cycles and getting ready for that. A lot of that preparing for normal, I think, is just carrying over as much as we can from where we stand today into an event. Then we've got our during the event. We touched a little bit on that. Jason talked about choosing roles. I think you have to have roles in order before it happens and not have them concrete because something might change. Give you an example. If you're not in just a family setting and you're in a group setting and your wife's role, my wife's role was cooking in our family setting, cleaning, doing those things, laundry, caring for the children, household SOPs. But then we got into a group setting and she didn't have as much need there. She would need to be prepared to shift her role towards what was necessary. Same way, if you or I walked into another group, we would need to be prepared to shift our role because maybe we're not the best scout, but maybe we're better than what they had. And even if that's not what we were prepared to do, that might be what we shift into. So I think a lot of that leads into moving into a normal cycle, at least in the event of a crisis. And we talked about games, having those ready so that you and your family can at least have some engagement away from the event so you don't have to think about it, because that's huge. I mean, it's going to be on everybody's mind. Even look at today. If everyone in this room stopped getting any money from this point forward, you are in a crisis event. Mm-hmm. And not to think, there's no way any of us can think that wouldn't be on our mind 90% of the time.
Because it's terrifying.
It is terrifying.
One of the things that you need to start doing now, which is also before the event, but it's definitely a must to carry on through the event, is stress management, a way to deal with the stress. That was one of the, that's one of the big things in the military that they teach you is you've got to have an outlet. Whether you're going jogging or you're hitting a heavy bag or you're
Right.
doing this, you know, anybody that was over there in the sandbox, you know, it was high stress. It was crazy. And you had to be able to develop that stress. Now, one of the bad things that happens with this, and Patrick, I know you can relate, is that once you've been in it for a little while, it gets easier.
It does.
You know, oh, that bomb that went off over there, that IED that went off over there, you're not freaking out about it as much. You're just like, oh, it's just another day here in Baghdad. You know,
Stress inoculation is what it is.
and then as you go, you become Semper Gumby. You start to, your whole role, your whole attitude, your whole demeanor, everything changes. And as it changes and you make it through the event, I honestly feel that when we get to the part after we get through the event, that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll adjust as you're going through it. When the first initial, the EMP hits, or the
Solar flare or whatever.
flare, or the red dawn, or the dead starts walking the earth, the first weeks, month, you know, it's going to be, excuse my French, but it's going to be hell on earth. Your stress level is going to be through the roof. You're going to be snippy with your spouse. You guys are going to be at each other. That's why it's important to have that type of stress management, to be able to sit back and go, you know, let's take 5, let's go do some yoga, or let's go do it, or something to bust the stress up. But once the new normal comes in and you adapt and you're changing and you're accepting the way that the world is, then you fall back into a routine. You'll fall back into your normal routine. It'll just be a normal routine without electricity or without running water. You know, and then you develop your own stance, you develop your own confidence when it comes to dealing with this, and your own ways of doing things, and you develop your own new normal. And
Right.
my new normal would be different than Patrick's, and different than Brad's, and different than Mama Old Ways, and all those. We'll all have our different normal.
That's true. And I think I try to think back, and I know you guys can respect this, Patrick and Jason. You have served our country. When you're in basic, tell me if you're just too tired with your daily task to almost think about anything else.
Yeah.
Oh, you get tired. I think it's worse. It's worse outside of basic than it is in basic. Because
Okay.
what would happen is after you get out of basic, then you go off to your first duty station. And once you get to your first duty station, they throw you into that situation to where there is literally nothing to do. Hurry up and wait is a common term in the military. And it's at that point where they're like, there you go. You got to just wait until something happens.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what to do in the beginning. And so, like Jason says, you have to learn it. And the first time, embracing the sucks, but it gets easier as it goes.
Yeah. You figure when you hit basic, receiving is your rough part, because you're adjusting your sleep schedule or lack thereof. Especially at Paris Island, it was like the first 3 days you don't sleep. And it's just part of the breaking down process. You know, after that, you fall into the routine. You start to fall into what's the military life.
They give you your normalcy.
Yeah.
Right.
But then when you graduate and then you go to your MOS school, it's still structured enough, but the hurry up and wait is starting to creep in. You know, and then it's, how do you deal with this, or how do you deal with that? You know, or you stuck on Firewatch out there in a bunker in 29 Palms, California, with a dark green Marine from Chicago, and he's freaking out because coyotes are going, and you scare him to death so much he passes out, and then you're standing in front of a man.
Yeah, so I think with that in mind, that's where roles really come into play, because you will just need to do those things without question, without thinking, get those jobs done. and then rest, and then start over again. And like Jason said, have an outlet for the stress that is going to come.
Yep.
But now let's talk about the return after the event happens. Sometimes and in some ways, that rebuilding phase is so long that it almost blends into a limbo. And I think that a lot
Almost
of
like
places
you're living in the 1800s.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of places around the world right now are undergoing that limbo after they've experienced civil war or social disorder, after they've experienced economic collapses, after they've experienced a real war.
Hurricanes, Puerto Rico.
Exactly. Right. So that rebuilding phase is huge. During that rebuilding phase, of course, you're going to adopt the things that you did in your normal lead up, in your normal during the event, and you will continue to do those things. But you also have to look to the other side. And I think mental health is going to play a huge part there.
Huge.
And if you don't have, and you can't say I've been of strong mind my entire life, I don't even have to think about it, because we're not gifted with that foresight to see our breaking point. And if we don't have a core outlet, a core group, then I think that a lot of individuals will have a very hard time. So what do you guys think about developing that communication with other people in your group or other people that you plan to have continued communication with after an event, whether that's by ham radio, or if it's localized, by some form of post? Do you think that developing that group of just, I'll listen to you, you listen to me, give me what, pointers, I'll give you what I can think, but I won't be upset if you don't take my point of view. How important is that for the return to mental normalcy during a disaster or after a disaster?
Well, numbers are prime on that. If you have more people, it's going to be a lot less of a hassle just to do. Say, hey, you have this one thing to do that. You don't have several things to do. When you have numbers, you can spread that proverbial peanut butter and not have to worry about that so much. But the stresses of having to do everything yourself is a big issue.
Sure.
I think
No,
the television show Jericho kind of touched really well on this, and I think it might have hit too close to home is the reason why they canceled it. But one that they had the initial, the bombs went off, and then people, they started going through all of the ripple that went through the bombs, and they all dealt with it. But as time went on, you started seeing people change and accept the new quote unquote normal. And then you saw the two fights between the two towns because they wanted the salt and then they wanted the steel, blah blah blah. But then one of the things that and maybe it's just the way that I think, one of the things that I worry about most when it comes back to coming to rebuilding or coming back after an event is the struggle for power. Because there's gonna be those that are going to try to run and pick up everything and be the ones in charge again and then force their agenda. Right. Because no matter how bad the event is I really don't think as people we ever learn truly from the mistakes. And then you'll have people that you'll have your survivals, the ones that survive, depending on the length of the thing that you go through, whether it was an EMP that sent us back to the 1800s before they could get power again, whatever the tragedy was that we were going through, depending upon the length, your might get set in your ways, and you're comfortable now. You're comfortable with the fact that you have to go down to the river and pan the water up, or you built your pipeline to take water from the river and bring it to your house with a pump. You don't want to give that up. And I think having to be able to communicate and take that step back and say, okay, I'm going to relinquish this control and accept the grid again is going to be difficult for a lot of people. And I'm raising my hand. We are probably going to be one of those people that are going to be, we've done so well without it, so I don't want it back, you know? And I think that between that, because you'll have your money hungry people that'll try to put their claws in it. And again, that may just be my preparedness mindset, my way of thinking, my ghost in the closet kind of thing that I worry about. But that's one of the things that I worry about, because you'll get to the point, if you've made it through it to the recovery phase, you've made it there. You've got to the light of the quote unquote end of the tunnel. But you've developed your skills, your habits, your roles, your jobs that you're going to be used to. And you're going to have ownership in them. They're going to give you a purpose in life. You know, that's one of the things you hear all the time about the servicemen and women that are coming back from over there, and they're getting out, and they need a mission. They need a mission. They need something to focus on.
Constantly something.
Yeah. When we go in the middle of whatever it is that we're going through, we're going to have little missions. We're going to have things that we have to focus on. We're going to have to make sure that we've got the water going so it can be purified, so that way we can cook and drink it. We've got to make sure our hygiene stays up. We've got to make sure that the garden is growing. We've got to make sure that our animals are safe, or we're out hunting or trapping. We got all of these things that we got to be doing. We got to educate our children, because you can't stop the education. So you got to be able to educate your kid. Education will take a turn. All of a sudden, algebra is not going to be as important as it is right now, or English literature is not going to be as important as it's going to. Those classes are going to be swapped out for horticulture,
survival, knots, stuff like that.
And yeah, and I think that's something that's important to talk about, and that's once the rest of the world around you is returning to normal, and that's give or take, you know, normal being lights on, normal being some form of recognizable trade. You know, there's so many different things. Maybe just having access to a doctor would be a great return to normal. But once you start that downhill, the good downhill, where the hump's over and it's kind of more free sailing from here on forward, you will have to look to other things. And I think if you plan for that now, like Jason, you have a trade with animal catching, with furs, with trapping that you can use during a disaster, and you could shift during that return to normal and say, okay, I'm going to, since I don't need this now to make my every meal, I can use a certain percentage of this to help myself economically. Mm-hmm. And so you can kind of shift that into a midterm profession. And I think if people don't plan for that, you will be stuck with that need of the next thing to do, or not want to get out of that role that kept you alive. And we look to social media a lot in the people who are currently undergoing a crisis, the people in Syria, the people in Venezuela. And I try to see what their daily discussions are like, what they're talking with friends about. And so much of that is that sort of, they're not so afraid of the bombs dropping today. Sure, a conflict might rise up and the bombs would drop, but they're not afraid of it today. They're more thinking about community, meeting with somebody, and having dinner with family or having dinner with friends. But yet there's that constant overlapping or overlaying fear of returning back to what things were during the height of the crisis. And so I think we'll be in that middle ground where we say, okay, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, things are getting a little bit better, but what about back there? you know, what if we go back there again? I think that will kind of create a Stockholm syndrome in our patterns at the time. And I think that that's where the lone wolves will have the biggest problem, because, hey, I've met plenty of people who I think will be fine by themselves during the disaster, but they're already a little on the sketchy side for community now. Right. So after they've done those things for weeks, months, years to keep themselves alive, I don't think they'll ever want to return back to where things were. And that makes them a target for other people. Mm-hmm. And so maybe just being open now today to a little bit of community, or talking a little bit about what you could do as a group after an event, once the things are turning around, whether that's, hey, you know, everyone pitches in and this household, because it's got 4 grown boys in it, gets a little bit of food from everybody because they keep a watch on everything. You know, there's those little things that we just have to be open to during, you know, in the recovery phase. Did you have anything major, Patrick, that you wanted to talk about there?
If I could, I would backtrack on that and talk about what's going to happen during the situation, during the issue. And we were talking about normalcy, but there's this thing called normalcy bias. Normalcy bias are those people who are like, well, it's never going to happen, so I have no reason to prepare. Or, well, if something does happen, the government's going to take care of me. Stuff like that. So it's those people, if you're going to prepare for anything other than your stores and everything like that and what's going to happen afterwards, you should really prepare for what's going to happen during that point. Because during that point, your patience, your limitations on dealing with people who don't prepare is going to be about that much right there. Because by the time people are knocking down your door and you're freaking going gun crazy, killing people because they didn't prepare themselves and think they're entitled to your stuff, it's gonna get crazy. And normalcy bias is a crazy thing, but it's a very real thing. And it's I'll give you an example. Welfare is the biggest normalcy bias there is. These are the people who can't fend for themselves, can't learn for themselves, and they're being taken care of by the government. What happens when that stops? They're going to think, oh, well, something's going to happen. Government's going to come help. FEMA's going to be here. And it's just not going to be there. And that's when panic mode sets in. And so my big fear is that mid phase and what we're going to have to do in order to maintain normalcy.
True. Yeah, and I mean, you make a great point about the welfare thing. I've got a church right at the end of my property. Once a month, they do a food giveaway. And the cars are lined up. And I've gone to 2 different pastors now and said, hey, I'll supply the seats. I'll give the class. But let's empower these people to start to raise their own food. Because if anything happens, the food that you're giving away comes all the way from Augusta. It's not going to make it up here. And these people are going to riot, and they're going to tear up the church, and then it's going to flood over, and everybody that lives on this road is going to be in danger. Or we're going to have a stack of bodies that we could build a retaining wall out of. You know? And it's but they don't want to do that because that takes a little bit more out of folks' precious time, you know, or it makes them be responsible for their own actions. And that's not the world we live in today. It's blame the other guy.
And I think to prove a good point, I think we should at one point in a next show or a show further down the road talk about home security and what we can do during that time frame, because that's going to be it's on the top 5 in my book anyway, as far as that goes.
I agree.
So here's what I would really like to do for everyone listening, and everybody, and Patrick, you, and Jason, you. We do a lot of things on our normal weekly basis that are either directly for preparedness or fall in line with our preparedness ideals. But there's a lot of things that we don't do. That can be something I've never done is tie-dyed a shirt with my kids, you know, but it's something that could be fun for them in the event of a crisis.
Right.
That tie-dye kit, especially if you get the Woods palette, you could use to turn all your bright white shoot me now shirts into something that you could actually wear under something.
Right.
You know, so that was just a very broad example, but anybody listening or anybody watching, choose something that you don't normally do. And maybe you've never made a wax cotton ball before. Maybe you've never made a petroleum cotton ball before to light a fire with. Do it before our next chat and come and tell us what your experience were. And I would really like to take that in to see what everyone's experience is on something that they've never done before and how it affected them kind of between now and then. Because I was talking with my brother today, and we don't talk very much, but he said, Brad, do you remember when I lived at my parents' house 18 years ago or whatever, 15 years ago, and I would sit on the driveway and I was learning how to make friction by fire. And so here I am in the middle of the city, highly populated area, the only crazy guy in the neighborhood, rubbing two sticks together while everybody drives their car by to make friction, fire by friction. And it took me a long time because you use a lot of muscles that you don't use on a normal basis. Whether your wood got a little bit of moisture in it, it's going to change your ability to a huge degree. But the neighbors would come by and they would leave me sticks. They didn't really know what I was doing. They just saw I was screwing around with sticks and making smoke. So they would leave me sticks. But it allowed me to kind of talk with them and develop that skill for myself. It was something I didn't know how to do at the time. So I'm going to choose something between now and our next show and do that one thing that I haven't done before or don't do enough, and then bring it to the next show. And I want you guys to think about it too. You don't have to say what it is. You might not know until the day before the show, but do something different, and then let's talk about our experience with it.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a above ground hugelkultur bed.
Nice. And where'd you find information on that from?
That would be for the BreakAway Homestead.
Okay.
He just released that this week, and I was surprised. And you know, I've read up on hugelkultur, and I thought it was just burying large logs and everything like that. But seeing his approach to it, it doesn't have to be a large box, above ground box, or anything like that. It doesn't have to be large logs. It can be smaller logs. And you know, I'm not really into the whole hugelkultur era thing, and so it looks simple. It looks easy, honestly, very easy. And my biggest problem with doing above ground or raised beds is the fact that dirt is so expensive.
Oh, that's crazy.
I live in a location that has two things, clay or sand. None of those are good to grow in. And so I have to do a raised bed if I really want to get something going well. And that video, it's probably 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long?
11 or 12, yeah. Close to 15.
Yeah, and it's very informative. I would go to his channel, check that out. And I liked it right away. I think I was number 4 on that list. But I'm going to definitely try that raised bed hugelkultur.
I'll be interested to hear your experiences. And Patrick, you recently had an experience with beekeeping and some potential disaster there. Could you kind of share with us a synopsis of that?
So my wife bought me a beekeeping kit in January. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. She finally gave me a kick in the butt, said, yeah, we're going to do this. You're going to do this. I know you want to do it. You're going to do it. So I bought a package of bees, about a 3-pound package. It came in the mail. And it's probably been end of April since I've had the bees. And I've come up against challenge after challenge. One, they killed the queen. Or I killed the queen. Something happened at some point where the queen wasn't there anymore, and there were not enough cells inside the comb or larvae in the comb to produce more bees. And bees have a life cycle. When they die out, they die out. That's it. So I was in emergency mode, but there was one single queen cell inside there, and that one queen cell did hatch because I checked it a week later, and there were a couple other queen cells in there, and I searched and I searched and I searched, and I got stung a few times, and I scraped away and continued on, and I could not find this new queen. Couldn't find it. So finally I went into emergency mode because I knew this brood, these bees we're getting at the point of the end of their life cycle, and the only chance of having more bees is to go and physically go get a new queen and get a bred queen from a apiary. Now, I went on to Craigslist and I found a apiary that's local. They say it's local, but it was an hour and a half away. And so I literally drove 3 hours for one queen, and the guy was like, "I can't believe you did that." I'm like, "Look, I'm trying something. I'm struggling here, and I want to get through this, and I want to be able to provide for my family. This is one way I can do it. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it works." And he was impressed with that, very happy about it. He says, "Normally I don't give one queen away. It's usually a minimum order of 5, but you're dedicated to this. You want more, just let me know. We're good." And I looked into that hive yesterday. As a matter of fact, it's been 1 week exactly, and I have freshly laid eggs, and I know for a fact that my brood will go on, and my hive will survive.
That is awesome. Awesome.
Did you
So
see
I'm
her?
happy about that.
Did you see her? Was the queen still in there?
I did not see her, but it's only been a week. And so as soon as I saw the eggs, just like the putting in a package, I just shut it right up, and I'll give it a week or so, and then I'll go in and specifically look for her.
I just got hit with colony. I'm assuming it was colony collapse, because I had bees. Y'all seen the video when they swarmed, and started watching them. And I started watching my bees from Hive A was going into Hive B, and then they were coming back out. And I'm like, why are they robbing? Real quick, Blaze and I, we popped the top, popped it. There was just no bees there. The only bees that were there were the ones that were there robbing and going from the other one. And we started to have a little bit of wax moth larvae in there, and I dug it out, but that hive is gone. I don't know if we got a new farmer that did the Roundup Ready corn or something, or if it was just they just didn't like their location and just left. Because they'll do that sometimes. And but I mean, I had a little bit of larvae in there, but I didn't have a queen. I didn't have enough bees to do anything, so I just left them. I'm letting them rob it down to feed the other stronger hive, and then I'm going to take everything that had a wax moth larva in it, and I'm going to burn it, and I'm going to probably burn those hive bodies because they were the ones that got hit with the wax moths before, and I froze them for like 2 months. And so I don't know if it was that or
Think about like putting them in your oven at a high temperature for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, there's lots of different things that you can do, but to be honest with you, I haven't found one that works yet. I just adopted the theory. It's expensive as all get out, but if I get wax moths, I just burn it. Because they burrow into the side of the frame or into the side of the hive body, and that's where they'll lay their eggs. And they'll go there, you know, she could lay near the end of the season, and those eggs could lay there dormant, and you don't know about it till the spring rolls around. Next thing you know, in 2 weeks, your whole hive is gone. You know, or you lost that one hive, but you treated it and you thought it got everything, and it didn't. Yeah, so that's why I'm just adopting it. That I'm just going to burn it and start over. I'm going to try and start making, because I play around with woodworking, so I'm going to try and build my own hives and frames, so that way it doesn't cost me as much.
Jason, did you have any ideas for what you might try, something that's new or outside of your normal procedure?
I've got a couple. I'm going to try to get my whole family involved with it, and maybe even make some short video clips that I can send if it's going to be on my channel next time or if it's going to be somewhere else.
Okay.
That I'll be able to put up to show us trying it. I got a couple of different things, see which one. Like I know right off the top of my head when I go in there, Carol Ann's going to be like, I want to use my bow drill because she built herself a bow drill.
Nice.
And so I know.
Has she gotten an ember yet or not yet?
No.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going. And even if it takes every day, have her go and put the drill outside in the sun where it can't get any humidity at the peak of the sun and take it in before the dew drops. Next day, do the same thing, take it in before the dew drops. And you're going to dry it out, and trust me that makes a huge difference. As soon as it gets humidity on it, you're going to be working that much harder.
Good to know.
And so, question for you guys. So after all this stuff happens, let's say we're past we're coming down off that hill of the SHTF, and things are going back to normal, for us, normalcy. What's your ideal normalcy?
Ideally, like what's the perfect world on the other side of that hill?
All right, what's your perfect world on the other side of that thing?
Local economic
Yes.
local economic fruit. So so that there's a local economy rather than the international economy.
The candlestick maker again.
Yeah, I want to see a local doctor who can make rounds.
Come to you.
That's right. Come to you and gets paid by you, or has good strong barter and trade system, but still having a national or at least a regional resupply of things that you just aren't going to get local, like certain medicines for the elderly or for those in passing. If we don't have a strong enough local unit to prepare for that kind of thing, or to grow the medicinal herbs that herpetologists know, or not a herpetologist, what is it? What's the profession of person who can take herbs and turn them into their chemical alternative? Anyone know?
I don't know.
Okay, so whoever can take the milk of the poppy and turn it into morphine to give the person that's passing. If we don't have that locally, I'd like to see a regional resupply of that sort of thing.
Well, that's wholly possible, because after the SHTF situation, the die-offs are going to be crazy. And so when you're sitting at a population that's a third of the size of what it was before, you got to think all that availability that was there for all the people that were there before, and now there's just a third. That should happen. And if the government wants to make itself available, the first thing they're going to have to do is charity to get things back on a normalcy basis.
That's right. So that's kind of my ideal. How about yours, Jason?
I'm right there with you 100%. But my thing is if I'm the only one that made it and I lost my family, my normalcies, I'm going to be Jeremiah Johnson. I'm going straight to the mountain, and y'all ain't never going to see me again. It's going to be me, my traps, and a gun. And and that's where I'll die, is up in a mountain somewhere. That'll be my I mean, you can ask my wife. That's what I've always told her. If anything, even it doesn't have to be an SHTF. If anything ever happened to my family,
that's your life.
That's my life. I'm Jeremiah Johnson. I will be up in the woods catching beaver and eating it, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, old ways, new times says no more global interlocking economies. Yeah, that's not that's definitely for the gain of the few at the cost of the many.
There's a Jeremiah Johnson in the chat.
Oh yeah, did I hear a shout out?
There is. I hear a shout out.
Herbal apothecary. Yeah, that's an herbalist. Somebody said, but real refined, real not just I took 3 weekend courses and I'm a herbalist.
I think my hardest thing would be to be able to come back into normal, to quote unquote normal, because what we call normal now will be dead and gone. But I would have major trust issues.
Sure.
Being able to trust that person, to try to trade with that person that was just trying to kill me and take my stuff 3 weeks ago so him and his family could eat.
I have this trust now.
Yeah, that's something I think
now too, but I'm saying it would be a lot worse than what it would. But I would love to see the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker come back into every town. The doctor that comes around, and if you don't have cash money, then you pay him with eggs or chickens or a pig,
or labor.
Yeah. Or we have a blacksmith in the town that he'll build your tools and the parts and stuff that you need. Because see, the things with the teachers and the doctors and blacksmiths and the mechanic and the construction guy, he's not going to have the time to be able to do those jobs and grow his own food. At least not
Right.
all of it that he'll need to be able to supply his family. So I would like to see that type of an economy come out of it and forget the paper crap.
Do you think it's going to be a one-room schoolhouse?
Huh?
Do you think it's going to be like a one-room schoolhouse society?
Well, like you said, when a third of the population is gone, and towns that had 2,000 people in it now be lucky to have 20, I think you're going to have the one-room schoolhouse. You're going to have the one doctor that has a 50-mile route that he,
Right.
you know, you're gonna have the one, you know, blacksmithing is going to come back. If you have an interest in blacksmithing, by all means, teach yourself now.
You know, I think that's a practice that we need to kind of talk about in a future show. And I touched a little bit. I don't know if the micro movie is still up that me and my brother had made at the time, where we had talked about a barter gone bad. Bartering and trading, you had mentioned trust issues now, is going to be huge. I mean, imagine the displacement where you have to have an Overwatch position because that trade might go sour real quick. So who's going to do that if it's just you and your wife and kids? Well, your wife will do that. Is she ready to? Do you have your signals in order that she'll drop the hammer as soon as you signal? And who's watching the kids at the time? Because having the kids with her definitely puts them in a position where if you both have to evac, somebody's not as quick as the other. So I think that's something that we should kind of talk about in a future live show or a future video, even if it's not a live show, and kind of discuss those ideas of.
I think that's awesome. Here's the deal, you know, a general store was there for that exact reason.
That's right.
You came in, you traded in your goods and you traded them for things that other people traded in.
Right.
And the general store concept, you had a mediator, you had a place where people can go and know that they're going to be safe to trade or barter, or, you know, pay cash money for something, for that dress that you wanted to get your wife, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
you would have to have one like that where you would trade in your goods for some type of credit system, and that's how that general store person would get the stuff that they need to be able to survive. Also, if I'm bringing in a dozen eggs, and he's like, okay, well, 2 of those eggs are for me. That's my charge for having this thing, you know.
Got yourself an 1800s eBay.
We got a new channel. Patrick's new channel, 1800s eBay.
Exactly.
Well, guys, we covered a lot of great topics tonight. We talked about before the event, how we prepare for normal, talked about during the event and how we fall into our roles, and some great ways to keep the stress down, and then after the event, and what our idea of the perfect post-disaster return is. Everybody in the chat, if you had something that you feel is important, because we don't catch every comment, please email it to me, fullspectrumsurvival@gmail.com, or you can go to Patrick's channel, BreakAway Homesteader, leave him a comment there. Jason's channel, Big Bear Homestead, leave him a comment there. Every person out there has a question that they wish they could get an answer to. I know I have a couple. I just haven't found the right person to ask. If we didn't get to your answer, please ask us again.
Well,
Jason,
luckily,
Patrick, go ahead.
Luckily, YouTube here has a new feature on it that all live streams now, the chat actually goes into the live streams now. So I will go back. This is what I'll do. I will go back into it, pull up those questions from the last 3 shows we've done, and we'll get a list going, and we'll have a session where we can actually reply to those questions and give them a decent answer.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, even if we did that offline, even if we just made a video and put it up, I think that could be a lot of help for people.
Mm-hmm. There was a comment a few seconds ago. I didn't catch the name. I caught his picture caught my eye because he's a devil dog. But he said that we are assuming that everybody will be civil after you make it through the initial whatever the SHTF was. And he's right, but that's where we were talking about with the trust issues.
Right.
You would, this is one of the things, how you were talking about having your wife is Overwatch. That's one of the things that you teach you could teach your family squad tactics.
Sure.
That way you can go in there, make your trade, and get out, and everything's going to be good to go. What's up, Jack?
I assume people are not going to be civil. I assume that they are always going to want to take what you have until they prove otherwise. And
it's going to be Wild West. Everybody's going to have a gun on their hip. And so you walk into a situation, you walk into a room where everybody has a gun on their hip, you're going to mind your P's and Q's.
That's right. And I think the reality of it is, and what we see in a lot of other crisis events around the world, people get to a point where they've seen enough death and they don't want to cause undue death. And they don't want to be a part. That's right.
And if you don't think that things are going to get bad and people are going to not be civil, you think people will be civil and everybody will come together and work as one, I challenge you to Google on YouTube, not Google, type in YouTube, just type in any Black Friday video. Explain to me how you think that when you go through an event, or people are automatically going to realize that the tragedy or what we're going to be going through in this SHTF situation, that they're all going to want to be team players. And they're fighting tooth and nail, killing each other over a plasma TV at Walmart that they got $800 for.
Yeah, we are selfish individuals as humans, and we work hard not to be, but people will lose that work hard real quick.
Yeah, and when
I think it'll turn old school pretty quick.
Yeah, and it gets multiplied and magnified when it comes down to a survival situation. That bowl of rice going into my child's hand or my hand versus your hand, people are going to get cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Terry asked a good question I think I want to cover before we wrap it up. What do you do when there is not a husband or a wife? Or what about people who don't have that, I would say, luxury right now? I think you just have to shift your preparedness plans and be actively looking for a group. That is really, especially if there are children involved, number one, you have to make sure that you are of sound mind to vet out the people of that group, because you are bringing your children into a situation where you're almost telling them to trust everybody there. And so that can go sour real quick. And if you don't
bring
that,
something to the table.
Yeah,
learn to bring something to the table. Right. Get a skill, anything at all that you can go, I can do this.
Yeah.
And sell it.
Yep. Because it'll be harder for single moms than it is for single dads.
Sure.
Because the dad or the male automatically, every male has a little bit of the alpha male syndrome into him. It may be like in this generation, it's buried deep somewhere
behind a unicorn, I think, and some fluff.
But it's
behind the snowflake.
But it's there. I mean, it's DNA. It's there. Where with females, it's not really there. I mean, you may come across an alpha female every once in a while, but they really have to do like what you said, Patrick. They're going to have to get a skill, hone in on that skill, and master it, and then be able to walk into that group and sell it. And it needs to probably be some type of off-the-wall skill that
learn how to make gunpowder.
Yeah, that they need. Making gunpowder, in this day and age, just about anybody can make soap and anybody can crochet, but taking animal hides and turning them into usable clothing, being able to break the hide down, that's a decent one that in a long SHTF, but it's gonna be, you've got to have a skill, and it's going to be a skill that's needed. You know, washing dishes is not going to be one, or cooking probably not going to be one, because there's going to be other females in that group that can do it. You know, it may be something that you need to think about, jobs that nobody really wants to do.
That's right.
You may want to be the girl that guts every animal that gets brought in, and you're good at it, and you can gut a deer in less than 2 minutes.
Or cleans the outhouse, or does stuff like that they don't want to do.
Being able to take the stuff from the outhouse and turn it into usable compost. You know, those things that people don't really think about. That's one of those that you just do some homework and find one, and then master the crap out of it.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So just keep those things in mind. No matter who you are, no matter if you've got no matter whether your entire preparedness plan is completely in order and you have nothing to think about in the world, you already live in your bunker that's hidden inside of the military bunker. Reach out to other people, get involved in community. Something can happen real quick that changes your level of preparedness, because you might have to go somewhere that you don't plan on going, but you might know somebody who would accept you in and put you to work 2 states away, getting away from fallout from a volcanic event or something worse. Get involved in community and find people that you can trust, and then work to vet them out past that. Jason, Patrick, did you guys have anything else?
For that girl, I would say just do a quick search on pre-industrial age skills, and you'll get a big list of things that were around way before everything started being automated, and it's something good.
That's right. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. We had a lot of great questions. Like I said, if we missed something, Patrick's going to look into making a list of them. But if you want an answer soon, please email it to either one of us, any one of us, and we'll get back to you. From Kelly and I to you and yours, and from Patrick over at BreakAway Homesteader, Jason over at Big Bear Homestead. Again, please go sub their channels, watch their content. I watch it every time it comes out. From all of us to you and yours, stay safe and keep watch.